Well, I'm glad to see everybody made it out in that blinding storm this morning. All the churches on you see on the TV, all of them shutting down, and ain't that the most ridiculous thing you ever heard of in your life? I bet every one of them will be at work in the morning. Oh, well, I don't think they wanted to show up no way. That's why they closed down, didn't they? Well, if you have your Bibles, turn to Daniel chapter 3. Daniel chapter 3. I want to bring it down on a level where we can all understand and appreciate what we're going to be looking at this morning, because the Bible is a practical book, and it's never meant to be over anybody's head. Of course, we could manufacture a few of those 16-cylinder phonunciating words, as Junior Samples used to call them. But would nobody else understand it but somebody that understands the 16-cylinder phonunciating words? The Bible was written to be practical so we could appreciate it and draw strength from it. And prayerfully, that's what we're going to do this morning. Got a couple of questions, though, for you. Do you ever feel like you're up against a wall? I think that's probably true more often than not for a lot of us. You ever feel like sometimes that when you take one step forward, you're taking two back? You know, that's the way life is. And you know, your enemy, Satan, and that's your enemy. Your enemy is not anybody sitting in here, okay? Even though they might look at you hateful, they're not the enemy, all right? Your enemy is the devil. Amen. He is determined. And the devil is not only determined, he's well equipped. Now, he uses a lot of things in his battery of weapons when he comes at you. He likes to use temptations. He likes to use sins. He likes to use lies. That's one of his biggies. You name it, every evil weapon he can level at you, he will. You can count on it. But you know, the biggest gun that Satan has to use against Christians is doubt and discouragement. That's the devil's double-barrel weapon. I was downtown yesterday, I reckon a little bit after lunch, and there come a guy down the sidewalk carrying a double-barrel shotgun. Yep. He did. Now, it was broke open, but I smiled at him. I made sure I did. There's something about a double-barrel shotgun that'll put the fear of God in somebody quicker than a single-barrel shotgun will. I don't know why. But that's the devil's double-barrel weapon, is doubt and discouragement. Now, when doubt and discouragement is fired at you and you go out without your armor on, here's what will happen to you. Well, the first thing you'll do is fold up just like a jackknife. When he fires at you, number two, you'll get overwhelmed. And everybody has been there. Let's just be honest. We're not going to all act like we're so spiritual this morning. When he does that, you can no longer move forward. It seems like the only way you can move is backwards. And victory will literally look impossible to you. But you know, the measure of a Christian, the scale that God measures a Christian on, is not his education. That's a nice thing to have, but that's not the measure. It is not measured by his money. It is not measured by his or her eloquence, even in the pulpit. It's not even measured by a person's spiritual gifts. The measure of a Christian is what it takes to discourage him. And that's true. Now, preventing discouragement is not an easy thing. We all know that. Sometimes it hits you all at once. Now, this has been a mighty tight week for a whole lot of people around here. I've had a lot of folks checking in with us, and Donna and I have spent more time in the hospital than we have in the house here lately. But sometimes they'll all hit you at once. Sickness will come along. Financial problems will come along. They go hand in hand an awful lot. Things that you planned not working out, they'll hit you sometimes. And you know, when all of those things start piling up on you, that's when the devil will step up to the plate and start whispering in your ear. And the first thing he'll tell you is God don't care about little old you. Who are you? And God don't have time for your problems. You ever feel insignificant sometimes, or the devil tells you that you're insignificant? And then sometimes he'll even go a step further because he's bold now. He's got guts. He'll go, is there even a God that cares about you at all? And sometimes you will hear that. Now I want you to understand that when the voice of negativity comes your way, that is not God. I don't care whose mouth it's coming out of. It might come out of my mouth one day, but that's not God speaking. Okay? It might come out of your best friend's mouth, but that's not God speaking. If it's negative, it isn't God. God has nothing to do with negativity. Well, you know, these very situations that we all face every day, and even more, came upon a group of teenage boys one time. Their names, their real names, we never talk about their real names, were Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. And their names got changed to Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Now you know who I'm talking about. Now these boys came from royalty. They were taken by force from their homes in Israel. And they were taken to a strange heathen land that's still a strange heathen land. They called it Babylon back then. It's called Iraq now. It's still there. Can you believe that? And it hasn't changed at all. These boys lost their parents. They lost their friends, their homes, and they even lost their names. When they were taken captive, they took their names away from them, took their identity away from them. And then they were told this. Now, picture yourself as a teenage boy. You've lost all of this, and then somebody that's in charge of your safekeeping comes up to you and tells this in your ear, says, stay on the good side of the king, and you'll be all right. Now, they were even offered the king's meat and the king's wine, the very best that Babylon had to offer. Now, let's picture the scenario again. They were a long way from home. Nobody was looking. We've all heard that before, haven't we? Nobody would know. The devil will whisper that too. All they had to do wasn't a big deal, not to the world. All they had to do was compromise just a little. And if they did, they could live a life of luxury. Now I ask you, please don't speak up. What would you do? Y'all ever remember old Carl Malden, the guy with the big bulbous nose on the streets of San Francisco that used to advertise the American Express? He'd go, what will you do? What will you do? Y'all ever seen that when you lose your money? You know, I'm sorry, some of y'all don't remember that commercial. Okay. What would you do? What would you do if that happened to you? Okay, I want you to think about it. Mom and dad ain't there anymore. Your friends ain't there. Your pastor ain't there. And then look at the trouble that you're facing. Nobody is coming to help. God hadn't bailed you out. And then you hear that whisper, I need to look out after me. How many times you ever felt like that? I need to start looking out after me. You're facing now a moral dilemma. I'm not sure what a moral dilemma is, but I saw that on TV one time, but I think that's the correct word for that. What will you do? Doubt and discouragement will bring the urge to compromise. Won't you understand that? When you're weak, when you're tired, when you've had enough, when you don't think that help is on the way, man, that's time to compromise. That's what the devil will tell you. I want you to look at Daniel chapter 3, though, for a few minutes, and we're going to see what these three boys did. Now, Nebuchadnezzar was a sorry dog. He was so in love with himself. That's true. He was so in love with himself that he planned one day to die in his own arms. I've never seen anybody that had a bigger ego to stroke than Nebuchadnezzar. And you know the expression absolute power corrupts absolutely? There's an example of it right there. What this man said was law. No matter what he said, it was immediately law. He was the ultimate authority, King Nebuchadnezzar of Iraq. And it says he made an image of gold. And you know, I'll bet he made that thing look like him. I'll bet he did. And he made an image of gold whose height was 90 feet tall. And it was 9 feet wide. That's a big stature now. 90 feet tall and 9 feet wide. And he set it up in the plain of Dura in the province of Babylon. And then Nebuchadnezzar sent to gather together the princes, the governors, the captains, the judges. Man, he had a staff. Okay, the judges, the treasurers, the counselors, the sheriffs, and all the rulers of the provinces to come to the dedication of the image which Nebuchadnezzar the king had set up. Man, he set this thing up out in the middle of a plain, 90 feet tall, 9 feet wide, made out of gold. Okay, and then he had all the leaders of every province of Iraq to come and to the dedication of the statue. And then it says, then the princes, captains, the judges, the treasurers, the counselors, the sheriffs, and all the rulers of the provinces were gathered together unto the dedication of the image which that Nebuchadnezzar the king had set up. And they stood before the image that Nebuchadnezzar had set up. He brought them and stood them in front of that statue. And he's going to unveil that thing. Then he had a herald to cry aloud and said, to you it is commanded, O people, nations, and languages. You got to also understand, he literally ruled the world then, won't just Iraq. It was everywhere. He was the man. That at what time you hear the sound of the cornet, flute, harp, sackbut, psaltery, dulcimer, and all kinds of music playing at once, you fall down and worship the golden image that Nebuchadnezzar the king has set up. And whosoever does not fall down and worship, that same hour shall be cast into the middle of a burning fiery furnace. That is some incentive to compromise, I'm telling you. There is no lawyer to get you out. There is no reprieve. That very same hour that you fail to obey that law, they're going to throw you in the middle of a burning fiery furnace. Just remember now, nobody's looking. Nobody that knows you is there. What's it going to hurt to just bow down in front of a gold statue? It don't really mean nothing. It ain't no big deal. We'll just do that and we'll save our hides that way. Not these boys. They were, as Clifton used to say, the real deal. Yeah. They were the real deal. And nothing was going to change their minds. So therefore, at that time when all the people heard the sound of the cornet, flute, harp, sackbut. They mentioned all the instruments, didn't they? Psaltery and all kinds of music. All the people, all the nations, and the languages fell down and worshiped the golden image that Nebuchadnezzar the king had set up. Now, the Muslims still do that, man. They bow toward Mecca several times a day. No matter where they are, they bow toward a false god. I said it, didn't I? All right. So at that time, certain of the Chaldeans came near. They were some of the ruling class of people in that province. And they were very, very jealous because they wanted to be the big shot. They wanted to be at the top. And if you remember from a prior chapter, Nebuchadnezzar had set these teenage boys, including Daniel, and gave them high positions because of the testimony that they did have. And the way that they lived before everybody. Even though they were captives and so forth, they held positions of rulership. And so they came and accused the Jews. The Chaldeans hated the Jews. They didn't want the Jews there. They didn't want them in any positions of leadership, and they wanted to get rid of them. So they came and they said to the king, "O king, live forever." They know how to butter him up before they tell him what they're going to tell him. And they said, "You, O king, has made a decree that every man that hears the sound of the cornet, flute, harp, sackbut, psaltery, and dulcimer, and all kinds of music, shall fall down and worship the golden image. And whoso falleth not down and worship, that he should be cast into the midst of a burning fiery furnace. So they reminded the king of his law. They always did that. If you read all through Daniel, they love to remind the king of the law. Now, there are certain Jews that you have set over the affairs of the province of Babylon, namely Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. These men, O king, have not regarded you, and they serve not your gods, nor worship the golden image which you have set up. And you got to understand, Nebuchadnezzar is a big, fat baby. And if he don't get his way, he has a temper tantrum. Now, you ain't got to be 2 years old to have that. You can be 50 years old and have that. You ever seen a 50-year-old have a temper tantrum before? That's pitiful. That's sad. But it's also entertaining at times. And so here's this self-indulgent whatever, King Nebuchadnezzar. It says, in his rage and fury, commanded Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and they brought these men before the king. Sounds like it's time to compromise now, don't it? All right, not yet though. Nebuchadnezzar spoke to these boys, and he says, is it true, O Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, do you not serve my gods, nor worship the golden image which I have set up? Now he's going to try to save face, but as we're going to find out, nothing can save his face in just a few minutes. He said he's going to try to smooth it over and give him a second chance so he'll look good, that he'll think everybody fears him. He said, now if you're ready, at what time you hear the sound of the cornet, flute, harp, sackbut, psaltery, dulcimer, and all kinds of music, you fall down and worship the image which I have made, then well, that's great. And then he gets arrogant. Then he gets uppity. And God is getting ready to put this old boy in his place. See, God hates pride. God hates arrogance more than anything else. He preached against pride and preached against arrogance. And read the book of Proverbs and read the book of Psalms and hear what Jesus had to say about that. And he said, but if you worship not, you shall be cast the same hour into the middle of a burning fiery furnace. And listen to this. This is when he stepped over the line. And who is that God that shall deliver you out of my hands? He's getting ready to find out, isn't he? Now, these boys should have been shaking in their boots. Here they were standing before, shaking in their sandals. They were standing before the king. He told them, I'm going to give you one more chance, and if you don't do it, I'm going to kill you. And what would you think that most people would do today? It wouldn't just necessarily be teenagers. I'm talking about adults too. They'd say, yes, sir, I'll do it. But they answered him. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered and said to the king, O Nebuchadnezzar, we're not careful to answer you in this matter. We're not afraid of you. If it be so, our God, whom we serve, is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace, and he will deliver us out of your hand, O king. But if not, be it known unto you, O king, that we will not serve your gods, nor worship the golden image which you have set up. Now you've got to know that while those boys were standing there in front of that king, and while they were being escorted up there to that king, and they knew what they'd done, that the devil was hitting them with every big gun in the world, telling them, come on guys, you're far away from home, nobody's going to rescue you, God is not going to do nothing for you, give in and bow down to the thing, it ain't no big deal. That's the way the devil works, man. He's whispering everything because they're under heavy attack right now. Probably the worst thing in the world. They're facing the chance of losing their lives. Okay? Now, they said, we will not do it. Now listen to this. Then was Nebuchadnezzar full of fury. And it says the form of his visage was changed. That's the old English to where that grin got wiped off his face. He was furious that these boys would dare stand up to him in the middle of the problems that they got. They have no names anymore. They have no homes anymore. They have no friends. They have no family. They have nothing but God. And here they are standing in front of the great King Nebuchadnezzar, and they said, we are not going to do it. And so the whole look of his face had changed against those boys. And it said, therefore he spoke and commanded that they should heat the furnace 7 times more than it was wont to be heated. Now you got to understand, Nebuchadnezzar was also a psychopath. He enjoyed killing people. That was a sport for him. I saw a mock-up of what the furnace looked like. And it was a room that pretty much took up where all of those pews are at right there, and it was a square cube. And they had a thing that went up the side and they had a hatch in the top, and those men would throw the people down in that furnace. And down at the bottom of the furnace was like a door and a big opening at the bottom, and the king had his chair set down there where he could watch the fun. And he would watch people getting burned alive, thrown down there in that furnace. That's what he did for entertainment, you know. And we think, oh, that's horrible. Well, look at some of the stuff we watch on TV. It's not any worse than that. And so, but Nebuchadnezzar was a psycho, and he wanted to have a little fun. And so he told them to heat the furnace up 7 times more than it was even wont to be heated, than it was supposed to be heated. So that had to have been just blazing hot. Then he commanded the most mighty men that were in his army to tie up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and to cast them into the burning fiery furnace. Now, to make sure that they burned really good, they didn't throw them in there with just shorts on or whatever. It said they were bound up in their coats. It says their hosen, but that actually means their socks, okay? Their coats, their socks, their hats, their other garments. Man, they put all that stuff on them to burn them up a little bit better. And they were cast into the middle of the burning fiery furnace. Now, because the king's commandment was urgent, and the furnace exceedingly hot, the flame of the fire killed those men that picked up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Those men died throwing them boys into the furnace. It was so hot. Have you ever gotten to a fire so close like that? Can you imagine? And they tied those boys up, and they had them bound hand and foot and put all their clothes on them. We're going to have a big bonfire. And they threw them in there, and it killed the men that did it. And these 3 men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, fell down tied up into the middle of the burning fiery furnace. Now, Nebuchadnezzar's sitting down there at his chair, and he's got some of his lords with him watching, and they're looking forward to having a good time watching these boys burn up because of the fact that they stood up against the king, that in spite of the fact that they were being bombarded with doubt and bombarded with discouragement, and the devil was hitting them with everything he had, they still said no. He wants to kill them. He's sitting down there. There they come down through the hatch. Okay? And so these men fell down, bound in the midst of the fiery furnace. Now Nebuchadnezzar the king was astonished. And he rose up in haste. He got up out of his seat. And he spoke and said to his counselors. Did he sound like he needed a counselor, didn't he? Did not we cast 3 men bound in the middle of the fire? And they answered and said, true, O king. Oh, I love this. He found out who that God was that could deliver out of his hands. He answered and said, well, lo, I see 4 men loose, walking in the midst of the fire, and they have no hurt. And the form of the 4th one is like the Son of God. Yes. Nebuchadnezzar came near to the mouth of the burning fiery furnace. Now he's changing his tune. He just found out who that God was that could deliver out of his hands, and so now he's going to try a little sucking up to him. He came near the mouth of the burning fiery furnace and spoke, and listen to this, how he changed. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, ye servants of the Most High God. Didn't sound like that a few minutes ago, did it? No. And see, that's the way the devil is. The devil is a lying skunk, and he will whisper in your ear and do tell you all this stuff, and then he'll flee when you stand up to him. And he said, you servants of the Most High God, come forth and come here. Then Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came forth out of the midst of the fire. Now listen to this. And all of these, and everybody saw it. This was not something that was done in a corner. It says the princes, the governors, the captains, and the king's counselors being gathered together. Man, they all come to see this. Saw these men upon whose bodies the fire had no power. Neither was a hair of their head singed. That's a miracle right there. Didn't even singe a hair on their head, and neither were their coats changed. Their garments didn't even change, nor the smell of fire had passed on them. I've been many times, I used to love burning leaves when I was a kid. I thought that was the most fun thing to do. I was a wannabe firebug, I believe, and I'm glad I got out of that. And my dad is still a pretty good one. He burns all them leaves up down there in the woods at the house. And you could stand there and poke that fire from a distance, and you come back in the house and you smell like burning leaves. Your clothes will smell like burning leaves, even though you didn't get that close. Just being there, it's going to smell like it. But they did not even have the smell of smoke on them after they came out of that fire. Now, what does that say right there? If you refuse to compromise with the world and with the devil, when you get out of this world, you ain't going to have the smell of it on you. But unfortunately, there's a lot of people that give in to doubt and give in to discouragement. And when they get up to heaven, they're going to have the smell of the world on them. They're going to have their clothes aired out for a while. So Nebuchadnezzar spoke, and he said, "Blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who hath sent his angel and delivered his servants that trusted in him, and have changed the king's word, and yielded their bodies that they might not serve nor worship any god except their own God." And then he said, "Therefore I make a decree that every people, nation, and language which speaks anything amiss against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego shall be cut in pieces, and their houses made a ruin, because there is no other God that can deliver after this sort." Even the king of Iraq noticed that. When are we going to get it? When is it going to sink into our heads that regardless of our circumstances, regardless of what we're looking at, regardless of what somebody has whispered in our ear, it ain't going to happen unless God lets it happen? It's all up to God, but it is also up to us not to give in to doubt, and not to give in to discouragement, and not to compromise, because God has an incredible blessing for everybody that will stand their ground. One thing we need to understand: God is not an insurance policy to keep you out of trouble. I've never been in more trouble in my life than when I tried to serve God. The Bible even says, man that is born of woman is a few days and full of trouble. Now, that is all of us. Everybody got here by way of their moms, okay? Everybody that is born of, he said that because that covered everybody, all right? Man that is born of woman is a few days and full of trouble. God is not an insurance policy to keep you out of trouble. Many times there will be trouble on every